Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another webinar with Streak. In this webinar, we are going to cover trading trend lines. Let's quickly get started. So, the following topics are going to be covered in this webinar. First is understanding trend lines. Second is scanning for stocks with up and down trend lines. How do you scan stocks where upward trend line is being formed or downward trend line is being formed? Adding breakout conditions to trend lines, understanding regression lines, scanning for bullish and bearish regression lines using scanner, and then at the end some bonus points to keep in mind when trading with trend lines. So what are trend lines? If you can see the picture here on the right side, you will see that there is a line which is touching the lows while the price is going up. This is called a trend line. Now an upward trend line is always drawn by connecting the lows, new highs that the lows are forming. Okay, so let's understand it in a bit more depth. Prices often bounce off certain levels, creating connectable points which are then joined and extended. That's how you draw this trend line. Okay, so trend line can be used to determine the direction, the general direction of the trend, not the small price movements, but the general direction. The slope of the trend line determines the direction of the trend. Okay, so this is a positive slope. That means the line is going upwards, so the trend line is indicating bullish direction. Whereas if the line is going down, okay, which we'll see in the upcoming slides, it indicates a bearish trend. The strength of the trend can be determined by using trend lines. Steeper the angle of the trend line, stronger the trend. Okay, so the more steep this line is, if this line is flat or very horizontal in nature, then trend is very weak. But if it is highly inclined, that means if the slope is more, then it indicates a stronger trend. Also, the more number of points that can be connected to form this trend line, it indicates the stronger viability of the trend line. Trend line acts as a support and resistance and can be used to and can be extended in future to create future support and resistance levels. So for those who have not seen our previous webinar, which talks about trading support and resistances, this also acts as an extension to that. So there are two simple kinds of trend lines: uptrend line and downtrend line. Uptrend line is drawn by connecting higher lows. What that means is the new lows which are forming are higher than the previous low, or you can also say rising lows. So the oldest low is lower than the newer low, and even the newer low is higher than the previously established low, right? So that's how an uptrend looks like. A downtrend looks like this. On the right side, it's drawn by connecting the lower highs which are being formed, but they are lower than the previously formed highs. Okay, so let's get into creating a scanner which identifies uptrend line. Okay, so the condition is very simple. If you see the screenshot here, uh, it scans on Nifty 100 on 15 minutes time frame for candlestick charts, and it uses 10 consequently. The lower low of 10 candles should be higher than the lower low of previous 10 candles. That's what this indicates. And the that previous to previous lower low should be higher than that of the even older. So let me create this, and while creating it, I'll explain it in further depth. So let's go into create a scanner. Okay, so I'll just change this to 15 minutes. Or let's keep it 1 hour so that we see much more established levels. And we'll also use Nifty 500 instead of Nifty 100 so that we can scan our merged stocks. Okay, so the first thing, if you remember, we have to use period min. Period min is basically a shortcut to identify the minimum value for 10 candles. This is 10 here. Okay, now what period min we want? We basically want this period min for the lowest value of the low in last 10 candles. Okay, so remember the lowest low of the last 10 candles. I'm using offset -1 to take the previous candle which has just completed. If I keep this offset 0, it will basically take the current candle which might or might not have completed. Okay, so just to be safe, such that all the candles have completely formed, I'm using -1 here. So what am I doing here? I'm just identifying what is the lowest low that has been formed from the latest candle to the previous candle. If I have to show it on chart, let's say I'm basically trying to identify if this is the current forming candle, what is the lowest low that has been formed from this candle to from here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So between this candle from here to here, let me just remove this. Yeah, from here to here, what is the lowest low that has formed, which is this value? About for Ambuja Cement, it's 193.55. So this function will let us identify the lowest low that has been formed in the last 10 candles. Okay. Now, if you remember for an uptrend, this should be higher than the previous time period, whatever was the lowest low formed. Okay. So to do that, let's just say higher than. Now I'll again use period min. So now again I want for 10 candles itself, but a lower low should have been formed with an offset of -11, which basically means skip the first 10 candles, because this already is calculating the lower low of first 10 candles. Before that, in the previous 10 candles, what was the lowest low formed? Now that lowest low, this one, should be lesser than the new lowest low, showing that a rising low is being formed. Okay, so let me add another condition. I'll just say the previous one with offset of -11, okay, is higher than period min. So it's very straightforward. It's very simple. Once you see it in chart, once you have in your mind how many candles you are calculating, it becomes very easy. Okay, so this. Now if I just give it a name, up trend line Nifty 500, and save and run scan. So you can see immediately it scans all the stocks and gives us a Nifty 500. There are so many. Without this, if we had to do it manually, it would have become a tremendous challenge. So let's do it. Let's check it in chart. Let's open Ashoka, right? Ashok or Ashok Leyland, both came in the results. If you see here, if I draw a, let me just select line. So from the previous 10 candle, the lowest low that has been formed is somewhere here. Then previous to that, the lowest low has been formed here. So the trend line looks like this, something like this. So it's a rising uptrend line, but not the most steep one. So it's not that great bullish kind of a uptrend. But the scanner quickly identified a stock where the lower low is rising. Okay, so higher lows are being formed. Let's look at Ashoka, which again was scanned. So if we look at our results, Ashoka, Asian Paints, 3M India, a lot of stocks have been identified. Okay, so we'll not go through every stock, but let's open a few. So let's open Ashoka, it's already there. So let's look at this. So this is showing an extremely bullish uptrend based on the line that is being formed. Okay, so if you see, it's something like this. Okay, so depending upon how many 10 candles are here, somewhere from this point to this point, trend line is being formed. Okay, so this again forms a bullish trend line. Sorry about this. Yeah, this again forms a bullish trend line. We can also look at that upward trend line, you can say, of how is it looking on 3M India. The 3M India, because the lowest low was formed here, looks something like this. Okay, so based on this, you can identify what is the new lowest low is formed, and you can identify which stocks have a rising low. Okay, so using rising lows, we basically can identify where an uptrend line is being formed. Okay, so with streak scanner, it becomes very easy for you to identify those kind of stocks. You can easily see that out of 500 stocks, quite a few stocks have been scanned on an hourly candle. We can also do the same thing on a 15-minute chart. Just change the time frame and run the scan. So you get a different set of stocks which on a 15-minute time frame are showing a rising uptrend. Based on this, there are many ways, there are different techniques people use. Even you can formulate your own to decide to follow the trend, or decide to wait for that breakout to happen to take a trade. Okay, so let's move ahead with with something called breakout of uptrend line, right? So here we have shown a bearish breakout. A breakout of an uptrend line is considered a bearish sign. It signifies that the stock might reverse the trend and has broken the support. Because if you remember earlier, we just discussed that trend lines act as support and resistance level, right? So in this case, in an uptrend line, because we are using rising lows, it becomes a support level. And if we identify that, okay, a close has been formed where the close price has become lower than the last 10 candles low, and it has broken this kind of a line, it indicates that it basically indicates that a breakout has happened on a bearish side. So let's modify our scanner to identify this. To modify this, only one line needs to be added to the same scanner. You just have to say the current close, the latest candle's close, okay, or the current price is lower than, okay, it is lower than the period min low of -1. Because we basically are saying that whatever the lowest low has been formed in last 10 candles, the current close price has broken that. So let's scan, let's see if any stock comes. So we get quite a few stocks, not as many as before. Let's look at Amber, where this has happened. Okay, so one second, let me just draw it like this. So for the last 10 candles, from the offset of -1, this is the lowest low which has been formed. Okay, and then this is the lowest low. So if I draw a trend line from here, sorry, this has to be 15 minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah, so now let me just adjust this line. We can clearly see that a bearish breakout has happened. Let's look at another stock. We can look at Bebel. Here again, very strong example. The trend line is something like this. Okay, it's an upward trend line on 15-minute chart. Because we are looking only at two conditions, it's sometimes might become hard to visualize because only two points are being used to identify a trend line. But you can easily add more and more lines to identify a long continuing trend. For the reason to be able to identify stocks easily and explain, we have done this. But you can simply go ahead and just add another period min. So you can just add another period min where you can just say that the low of minus 21. Okay, so that previous 21 candles is higher than okay, then we can say period min again, and is lower than minus 31, right? So now here it will basically scan for a long. So after the first two conditions which I have highlighted, we could have added the third one to identify a long one, but just for the sake of being easily able to identify long running trends, for the sake of the webinar, we remove this, because see, with this only one stock came, and sometimes stock might not come. That's why we say that's why we have take live feature, so that whenever the stock matches this criteria, it'll alert you on that. So we can even check this out. So it's Ratna, RATN. Okay, so let's look at this. So this is a very classic example. So we have taken a longer period, so we see a very smooth trend line, long trend line. Okay, so at the end of the near the end of the webinar, we'll also talk about key bonus tips. So in that we have also covered why is it important to have a longer look back period. When I say look back period, a longer this kind of an offset period to identify a stronger trend. Now here the breakout is very clear. The close price has crossed below the trend line, below the support, and is indicating a bearish breakout. Okay, so let's move on. So next we'll create a downtrend scanner. Okay, downtrend line scanner. So again, it is very similar to the previous one, and downtrend line scanner just tries to identify falling highs. It is just the same mechanism but in reverse. Okay, instead of period min, we use period max of highs to identify the higher highs. Okay, which is lower than the previous candle's higher high, so previous 10 periods higher high. So this period 10, you can make it 20, 30, how much ever you feel you require to analyze the data. Okay, for simplicity, we have used 10 here, and then inside that we have used -1 and 11 and 21. But the concept should be understood very clearly, and then it becomes very easy to create any kind of scanner in just minutes. Okay, so having said that, let me just create this downtrend scanner. So I'll just go to my scans. So I think I have created one already. So let me just edit this. So if you see clearly, so this again has breakout. Let's remove that. So it's very straightforward. I have just set period max of 10 candles should be higher for the high price. So basically I'm identifying highest value of high in last 10 candles. That should be lower than the highest high value of the previous 10 candles. Okay, understand that clearly. The highest high of the current 10 candles, the latest 10 candles, should be lower than the highest high of the previous 10 candles, indicating a falling high. Okay, indicating falling highs, correct? Because the highest high of the last 10 candles, if you can see my mouse at the right side, the highest high of the last 10 candles should be lower than the highest high of previous candles. Okay, that's why to create that we use this mechanism. Now again, the second condition is period max 10 of higher high of previous 10 candles, so -11 here, is lower than the higher high established even before that in the previous 10 candles. Okay, obviously, like how I showed earlier, you can add one more condition. similar to this and identify one more thing. So let me just do that. So even older trend. So I can just say high period max of high for offset 21, okay, is lower than the the highest high or the high value that was achieved in 31 candles back, okay, for that 10 candle period, 10 candles in 10 candles basically. Okay, so let me do this. Let me run a scan. Now we get 4-5 stocks: Axis Bank, Grasim, Hindustan Unilever. Let's plot this on chart and see how it looks. So this has been done on Nifty 100. You can change it to Nifty 500 as you wish. So let's look at the charts. So we see that Axis Bank has been identified as a downtrend. So I just changed the hour to 1 hour candle, okay, and let me just pull it down. So we see that Axis Bank is being indicated to be in a downtrend. Sorry, double lines came there. Yes, so you can see that in last 31 candles it basically was indicating that the the highs which are falling are lower than before, which is basically falling highs indicating a downtrend being formed. Right, we can also look at Grasim, which also has been identified. So this is a very, like, it's a more stronger downtrend than Axis Bank because of higher slope. Okay, so if any breakout that has to have, if any breakout happens above this line, this this trend line can act as a resistance, and if the trend breaks that, it can continue on a bullish side. So with this, you can easily identify downward trend with streak. Now, adding just one more condition helps you identify breakouts to downward trend. Breakout to downward trend is considered as a bullish sign. It indicates that the stock trend might be reversing as it has broken a resistance level. Okay, so how to do that? Again, very simple. You just have to add one line which says close higher than period max of the latest 10 candles. Let's do it. Let's go here. So I'll just say close higher than period max. I'll just say high of 10 candles. So this basically lets me identify whatever was the highest value established in last 10 candles, my close price has become higher than that. Right, so on Nifty 100 we didn't find anything. Let's check on Nifty 500 if we find something. Okay, so we find these two stocks. Let's look at Castrol India. Let me just plot that, Castrol India. Okay, so we clearly see that the trend was something like this, because we have said highest high of the last 10 candles. If I zoom in, now this trend has been broken by the close price, and that's why the stock has been identified. Okay, so because I used here high of -1, it basically lets me identify the highest high that was established in last 10 candles, which is in this case this level of 131.83, and the close has crossed higher than that, and that's why this stock has been identified. So this way easily you can identify breakouts on a downtrend line which indicate a bullish sign as a resistance has been broken. Okay, let's move on. So methods to find let's cover this. Methods to find stocks with rising and falling linear regression line. Okay. So a linear regression line basically is a line which best fits the price movements. That's why the name linear regression. It can be used to determine the general direction of the trend, as well as the mean reversion, and can also be used for mean reversion trading. We'll see in a minute how. Okay, so stock trading much higher above the regression line can be said to be expensive, and the ones trading much lower or below the regression line can be said to be discounted. Okay, so and discounted as a lean regression line technically represents the mean price. So here, very important point to keep in mind: the calculation of regression line is very complex, but certain approximations help us determine it using streak scanner easily. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is not the exact regression line, but an approximate version of that, which with which easily you can identify those stocks using streak scanner, and then plot it in chart. Okay, so this is how a rising regression line looks like. The center line, if you see here, is a regression line, which is basically the linear regression line, and the up and bottom parts are the bands. Okay, this line represents the best. This line best represents the price trend or price movement. Now, this is a Tata Steel 5-minute chart example of a rising regression line. So let's look at how we can create it in streak scanner. Okay, so again, keep in mind this is an approximation. The scanner checks if the average moving average of highs and lows, if you can see here, SMA high and SMA low, both are rising. Okay, now this rising period is checked for 15 candles, so that's why it's rising 50 period regression line, so 50 candles. Okay, and then the scanner can also be used to identify discover stocks trading in a rising channel. Okay, let's quickly see this of how to create this, and then let's check it in chart. Okay, so for the sake of time, I have already created a rising regression scanner here. Let me just open that. Okay, so all we do is we calculate the lowest value of the last 50 candles of okay, in last 50 candles I check the average of high, moving average of high and low, to identify what is the lowest value that this average had, and then I subtract it with the high and low of the previous one to identify whether, with the latest value, to identify whether it is rising in nature. Okay, so if I do the scan, okay, we didn't find anything. Let me just check that out in Nifty 500 and let's see if we can find something. Great, so we found quite a few stocks on an hour candle: Bhartiya Forge, Crisil, HDFC Life. Okay, to understand this better, let me open one of the charts in Kite and then explain it. So I'll just open Crisil. Okay, so we diagonally can see that it's rising. So let me plot moving average of high first for 20 period. You can choose any period. We basically are trying to explain, so we have chosen moving average of high. Sorry, we have chosen 20 period here. Now let me just put this again here. Now we are taking the sum of this and averaging it, and then identifying whether this value for the last 50 candles, okay, the period min basically identifies what is the value of this, what has been the value of this minus this ratio. Has it been higher than 0, which indicates the slope is positive. Okay, so if I have to see what the regression looks like for this, let me just go here. Let me just type Crisil. And change the chart to 1 hour and just type regression line. So you see that the stock is in an upward regression line. So this is how a regression line looks like. The scanner that we built approximates for that. Okay, so we have used moving averages of high and low to identify this trend. Let's look at something else. Let's look at HDFC Life and see how that looks like. Again, HDFC Life also shows a rising trend. And let's look at how that looks like in regression line as well. Great. So we can clearly see that here the period is 100. Let me just change the period to 50 because we also have created for 50 period as well. Okay, so this is how a 50 period regression looks like. So before we move on to falling regression line, let me explain the couple of concepts that we explained here. Now, we mentioned that the stock trading higher than regression line can be said to be expensive and lower can be said to be as discounted. Right now, there are multiple ways in which regression lines can be used to be traded. One is trend following, where you basically trade with the trend. Okay, you basically understand that the regression line is bullish in nature, upward in nature, so simple trend following mechanism. The other technique, which is bit riskier, is mean reversion, where basically if the price falls below the if the price touches the bottom band, the trade is basically taken as a buy, because being below regression line indicates discounted price. Mean reversion basically will say that the price will go up towards the line itself. Okay, so there are multiple ways to trade this. With streak scanner, you can easily identify which stocks are having a upward or rising linear regression line. Okay, so we have seen how rising looks like. Let's look at how falling regression line looks. So this is a simple example of ITC chart for 15 minutes, which basically shows falling regression line. So let's see how to create this. Let me go here. Let me quickly edit this. So it is similar to the previous one, where instead of higher than, we have just said lower than 0. Again, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to check whether the average of high, moving average of high and low for last 50 candles is reducing. Okay, so that's what is being identified by this equation. Again, this is an approximation and not the exact calculation of regression line, because that's quite complex in nature and becomes very hard to manually calculate it in a scanner. So I have run this scanner on Nifty 500 on an hour chart, and we see multiple stocks: Cox and Kings, MRPL, VMart. So let's plot it in chart first to understand how they look, and with normal this thing, and then we'll look at how they look. So if you see here, okay, Cox and Kings have very low trades. So let me look at VMart. Okay, so we can clearly see a bearish or a falling regression line. Okay, being identified using moving averages of high and low. Let me plot this in with the actual calculation of regression lines. So we see that it truly indeed is a falling regression. Even the same thing is being identified here. Okay, so this is how with streak scanner you can easily identify across 500 stocks that these are the 4 stocks where the regression line is falling or it's going down. Okay, so again, very simple. The scanner checks for average of moving averages of high and low has been falling. Okay, it scans for stocks that have been falling for 15 regression period line. and it can be used to discover stocks trading in a falling channel. So let's come to the bonus points section of this webinar. So trendlines act as, so things to keep in mind. Trendlines act as support and resistance level. Okay, at least 3 points should be connected to form a valid trend line. If you see in the scanners that we created here, this ones for both for up and down trend, we added 3 conditions to identify a solid trend line, to identify a valid trend line. Okay, the steeper the trend line, the harder it gets to sustain the trend, and as a result it becomes quicker if the and if the trend line gets violated, the results come quicker. Okay, now it is better to trade upward legs in a rising channel and falling downward legs in a falling channel. So what this means is, here in a falling trend line, it's better to trade the falling legs, which is basically trade with the trend rather than to trade against the trend, because the falling trends are longer. If you see here in the case of VMART, this trend line indicates a bearish trend. Now for at any point of time, if you are trading with regards to in the channel itself, so the upper part and the bottom part, these are the channels. If the price is falling and you trade with the trend, that the leg is longer, you can see the price movement is longer. But if you're trading against it, it's very shorter. So if you see here, the difference is from it's 1676 to 1664. So about 12 points. But if you see with the leg with the trend, it is much longer. It is 1698, a short from there to here, 1667. It's about 30 points. So that's what we mean by trying to say that in an upward in an upward regression trend, trading the upward legs is better, and in downward in downward regression channels trends, falling the trading with the falling direction or falling downward direction is better. Now breakout of trend lines can be confirmed with breakouts in indicators. That's very important to keep in mind. Whenever a trend line in breakout happens, as we have identified, you can also easily add any kind of an indicator to identify whether the breakout is being valid by the indicators as well. Okay, so thank you guys for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to write to us at support@streak.tech. A Hindi version of the same webinar will be available in coming few days. Okay, feel free to follow us on Twitter as well. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye bye.